Today I'm going to make this asymmetrical box joint challenge coin display out of ambrosia and curly maple. So if you stick around, I'll show you how I do it. Challenge coins are coins made specifically for military units, federal, state, and local law enforcement agencies, units within those agencies, fire departments, and any other first responder organization you can think of. Many people collect these coins and need a nice way to display them. I started off with this 9-foot 8/4 piece of ambrosia maple that is rough cut and needs to be plain smooth. I'm not worried so much about the dimensions since I usually feel that measuring is extremely overrated. I'll just plane it down until I have 2 smooth sides. Although I'm only going to be using about 18 inches, I'm going to plane down the whole board so I'll only have the snipe on the ends to worry about. If the rest of the board has to be flattened later, I'll just deal with it. One of the few times I'll measure on this project, I'll feel for the snipe with my fingers. In this case, it ends at around 2 3/4 inches from the end. And I'll make a mark at 3 inches and another at 18. I'll cut out the rough length at the miter saw. Because one edge of the board came dead straight from the lumberyard, I'm not going to worry with using a joiner to give me a square edge. I'll just run the straight edge along the table saw fence to square up the rough side, then run the other side through, just shaving off enough to make the stock square. Next, I'll square up the curly maple that I'll be using for the leg. Once I get the final width of the leg, then I'll leave the table saw fence where it is and cut the ambrosia maple to the same width. Like I said, I'm not much for measuring. Now it's time to cut the grooves the coins will sit in. It may be counterintuitive, but I've found that the grooves are better suited perpendicular to the top of the display instead of perpendicular to the table or desktop the display will be resting on. Because coins may vary in thickness, cutting a wider groove that allows the coin to lean against the back edge of the groove is more secure and consistent than a groove where the coin will have to either balance to be straight up or lean too far back. This makes it easy to cut the grooves on the table saw. I use a dado stack measuring 7/32 width to cut the grooves, and I make them 7/32 deep, and I make the grooves around 1.5 inches apart. I did have to do some math to figure out how to get the same spacing of the front and back grooves to be the same distance from their respective edges, and I have the grooves an equal distance apart. It came to just under 1.5 inches. I'll be cutting an ascending thickness box joint, each pair of fingers being 1/16 of an inch thicker than the previous pair. Since the thickness of the top and the legs are different, I'll use the top to set the depth of the cut for the legs. I'll leave the blade just a hair proud so I can sand it flush after the glue up. It's a good idea to use a backer board just to make sure there's no tear out when you're cutting the teeth. Using a formula that I wrote down to make sure I don't mess it up, I begin to cut the fingers, keeping careful count of the revolutions of the crank on the carrier. When I reach the end, I'll flip the board so that I start on the opposite side of the other end of the board. That will make sense later. Now, when I started to shoot this video, I realized halfway through that I was getting terrible joints, and I finally tracked down the problem and discovered that my table saw had a warped arbor, and I detailed all of that in my previous video. I replaced the arbor and the bearings and even detached my bicep in the process, but now everything other than my arm is working perfectly. But I have to talk about my box joint jig. I've looked at every box joint jig on YouTube, and in my opinion, this one is the best. This jig was designed by Ed Stiles, and I've put a link to his video in the comment section along with a link to the free plans for the jig. I was just about to pull the trigger and build the box joint jig designed by John at ibuildit.ca until I saw this one. John's is great and both work on the same principle, but this one just seemed easier to build. If you're going to make more than 10 box joints in your lifetime, it's worth it to build this jig. It's deadly accurate and almost impossible to mess up, as long as you can count to at least 12. And when you see how it works, you'll understand why. The jig is based on a threaded rod with 16 teeth per inch. That means one turn moves the wood 1/16 of an inch, 2 turns 1/8 of an inch, 4 turns 1/4 inch, and so on. So the patterns you can make with your box joints are endless. If you use a thin kerf blade or a 3/32 kerf, it messes up the math. At least it does for me. Ed Stiles says that different kerfs give you more options. For me, it just gives me a headache and more ways I can mess things up. So I'll just keep it simple and stick to either an 1/8 inch or a 1/4 inch blade. And because of that simplicity, I can do things that look really complex. Now I'll cut the fingers in the top, again using the formula that will give me fingers that correspond to the legs. This is the hardest math of the whole project, and having graduated with a generously given C in Algebra 1, if I can do it, I'm sure anyone can. All the fingers have been cut, so now I cut the leg piece in half at the miter saw. Then using a simple jig, I use the table saw to cut the legs identically so that the display will have an angle similar to stadium seating. Now for the glue up. The great thing about a box joint is it pretty much self-squares, provided you've made the cuts correctly. Since I use the perfect box joint jig, there is no problem there. Now, one thing I didn't consider when I started this project was that the grooves may interfere with the box joint itself. This is the first coin display I made with the ascending width fingers, so I never had this happen before. I guess I was just lucky. So in the future, I'll wait until after the glue up to cut the grooves in the top. So now I have to sand the fingers flush with the random orbital sander. I use 60 grit to start, then move to 120 once I get close. Now while I was at it, I made 2 more displays, one with 1/4 inch fingers and one with 1/2 inch fingers, so you can see the difference. On these 2 displays, I cut the grooves after the glue up and after the fingers were sanded flush. And then a final sanding with 220 grit. Once I removed all the dust with the tack cloth, I'm ready to start the finish. So what I used for this was a de-waxed shellac that I tinted with trans tint antique maple, just to give the wood a little color. A light sand with 320 grit and an additional coat of shellac. Once the second coat is sanded with 320, I follow that up with 2 coats of satin polyurethane. So if you know someone in the military, or as a first responder, or anyone else who may be into collecting challenge coins, this is a unique gift idea. So there you go. If you like this idea, I've got more builds coming, so feel free to share this video and subscribe. Thanks for watching.